No Tears Project, Oxford American, and the National Park Service present We Have Overcome, a conversation on progress and the path forward. Recorded at Medgar and Myrlie Evers Home National Monument in Jackson, Mississippi on September 27, 2024. Presented in partnership with One Voice and NAACP Mississippi State Conference. Made possible by National Park Foundation, Jazz Road, and South Arts, along with supporting partner Visit Jackson.
Hello, I'm Ebony Lumumba. I'm an associate professor of English at Jackson State University and chair of the Department of English and Modern Languages. But more importantly, I am here for a discussion with three dynamic individuals entitled We Have Overcome, a conversation on progress and the path forward. And we're specifically focused on Mississippi. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention where we are situated currently, which is the former home of Medgar and Myrlie Evers, which is now a national monument. We're sitting here in the living room, surrounded by history, surrounded by legacy. So it's the perfect setting for this conversation. I want to introduce to you, I want to call you panelists, but I think we're in a living room, so I'm going to call you guests, right? I want to introduce to you our guests, starting right here to my right, Mr. Hezekiah Watkins. Hezekiah Watkins, he is a lifelong resident of Jackson, Mississippi, so you're my homeboy, right? He has been a civil rights activist since he was 13 years old. Graduated from the Lanier High School, and that's an important fact if you know anything about Mississippi. You know why I had to mention that, anything about Jackson. Mr. Watkins is multifaceted, multi-talented. His activism started at 13, but it continues to this day. He is a proponent of activism for Mississippi youth, and he currently works with the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum just about every day. Every day you're there. I think one of his most outstanding feats is 36 years of marriage to his wife, Chris. Is that right? And they've been blessed with 3 children, 4 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. So the legacy continues indeed.
Yes.
To his right is Nsombi Lambright-Haynes. Hi, Nsombi.
Hi.
Nsombi is the executive director of One Voice, a statewide leadership development and policy advocacy organization headquartered right here in Jackson, Mississippi. Then the goal of One Voice, if you've not heard of this organization, is to build leadership in an effort to address structural oppressions, those that show up in institutions concerning public education and voting, the environment, criminal justice, and more. Nsombi serves on a number of boards. She's received a plethora of awards, all well-deserved, and we're honored to have her here on the couch. Welcome, Nsombi.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, Allytra Perryman. Hi, Allytra.
Hey.
Welcome. Allytra is a feisty community organizer. I really like that adjective, and I think it's fitting. She has over 20 years of experience as a community organizer and an education advocate. She currently serves as Deputy Director of the Mississippi State Conference, the NAACP. She has won several awards and serves on various boards, and all of them are better off for having her presence. Welcome, Allytra, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think we should get right into it. We have so much that we could talk about, and we've got representation from across the state. Allytra, you are currently on our coast.
Beautiful Biloxi, Mississippi.
Biloxi, Mississippi is beautiful. I can attest to that. And then Nsombi, Mr. Watkins, we are right here in Jackson, Mississippi.
Yes.
So we're representing, I think, a really good cross-section of the state. I want to dive right into this conversation. We have overcome, and we're talking about progress and where we go next. Nsombi, I want to start with you. Okay. Because next year we're going to mark 60 years since the passing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And when we celebrate anniversaries, we're often able to mark progress, what we've gained and how we've grown. But can you talk to us a little bit about not only the ground we may have gained, but if there's been any regression since that 60 years?
You know, there has been some regression, but I can't think about the regression without thinking about the progress.
Okay.
because there's been so much progress, there's been so much pushback. And if there hadn't been so much progress and there hadn't been so much victory as a result of the battles that folks like Mr. Watkins fought.
That's right.
And we had, so many, black elected officials to be able to get into office, so many court battles won, then we wouldn't have seen the regression. So it's hard to, look at the regression without, first, observing the progress that we had. So I can't say that the regression that we've seen matches the progress, because there's been far more progress than there has been regression. We're further ahead than we've ever been, and we're going to keep moving. Because when we fight, we win. That's a popular NAACP saying.
It's good.
And it's so true. When we fight, we win. And as we keep fighting, we keep winning. We just have to keep up the good fight. Keep fighting that good fight and keep getting into good trouble.
Keep getting into good trouble. And there's no victory without an actual fight.
Absolutely.
You can't win if you don't fight.
Absolutely.
What you're saying about there being more progress than there has been pushback. And the pushback has been sort of bred by the progress. It reminds me, Allytra, of something that you shared when we spoke a little bit earlier about these very present markers of the success, not only of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, but all of the positive resistance in our state that has led to this equity. I want to acknowledge that we're sitting in Medgar and Myrlie Evers' former living room.
Yes.
Right, a storied place. And when I think about that family and I think about Medgar Evers, his appointment as the first field secretary in Mississippi by the NAACP was pretty extraordinary.
Oh, yes.
And I think it started something.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about what you think that started and how we see the effects of that today.
So Medgar Evers went to World War II, and when he came back with a vision of some progress and what progression could look like for the state he loved. And he went to register to vote, and he was turned away. So he decided to organize all of the other World War II veterans and start this campaign to make sure they could vote and that their votes counted. And that type of fight is still here with us now, all of these years later. He set the framework for us. He also showed us how unity and coordination together would determine people with the plan. You can't beat it. Mm-hmm. So that is still where we are today. And sometimes we get comfortable in our victories, but we regroup and we come back and we fight another day.
We have to fight another day. I like that you draw us into Medgar Evers really before we knew him. He gets back from the war. He's experienced some freedoms abroad that are not available to him in his home. Mm-hmm. And he's a young man at that time, which brings me to sort of the critical role of young people in this movement work and in this sort of striving for equity. So, Mr. Watkins, I'm going to bring it back to you because we're young folks.
That's right. Thank you.
And your entrance into the movement started probably younger than you had ever imagined it would.
It did, yes.
It did, it did. So tell us a little bit about how you became involved in freedom work at 13, because it was sort of accidental.
Very accidental.
Very accidental.
Yes.
But then also, and then built out into, and you stayed in it. So there had to be some value to a young person like yourself being involved and invested in the movement. So tell us about how you became connected and then the value you saw of your youth in that work.
Okay, as a young black boy growing up here in Mississippi, especially Jackson, there wasn't a lot of things we could do. So my thing was watching television I love watching cartoons. And this particular day, I'm watching cartoons and I fall asleep. But I was awakened with the national news on. And they was in Birmingham, Alabama, the Freedom Riders. And I could not imagine what I was seeing. I saw black, whites, male, females. They were all being beaten. And I couldn't understand why these folks being beaten.
Yeah.
Even white folks.
Processing that as a child.
Right.
Yeah.
So not knowing. So I ran, when the news went off, I ran next door and got my neighbor. We were the same age. I said, man, you need to come to my house tomorrow and watch TV. He said, what we watching? I said, the news. I can't tell you what he said, but we don't want to watch
We can imagine.
news.
Yeah.
News for grown folks.
That's right.
But I was able to convince him to come, and he did. And the news came on, we sitting up there watching the news, and he was in shock.
Yeah.
Because he never seen not only a white person, he never seen a person being beaten, period, by a police officer.
Wow.
So we began to look into the Freedom Riders, and we was told to talk to some elderly. And at our young mind of 13, we thought maybe if we go in and talk to an elderly person, we thought that age would be around 25 or 30. And we went to the pool hall. Believe
Wait
it
a
or
minute.
not.
So the elderly people were about 25 and 30.
Yeah, like my age now. Yeah, we thought, you know, when you get up to 25 or 30,
Oh, yeah.
you
Wisdom.
become an elderly person. So we went to the pool hall.
Yeah.
And we asked this gentleman about the Freedom Riders, and he told us everything except the truth. And we kind of laid low, but we kept watching the news. And one day, and making this a little shorter than what it is, one day my friend came to my house and said, man, I have some good news. I said, what's the good news? He said, you got to stand. I said, man, I don't want to stand. He said, please stand. So I stood. He said, clap your hand. He said, not like that, man. Clap your hand with some rhythm. He said, that's not it. He said, I'll show you. So he came around the sofa, he said, and stomping his feet and just doing his thing. I said, okay, that's all. He said, no. The Freedom Riders coming to Jackson.
He was setting it up.
They coming to Jackson. I said, what Jackson?
What?
This Jackson. I said, what? The Freedom Riders coming to Jackson. So I jumped up and we was just having a good time singing and just marching around. So later on, we heard that the Freedom Riders was going to be at the Greyhound bus station
Right downtown.
on a Sunday. So, man, I sure would like to go. He said, so would I. Man, you know, we 13. How can we go?
Right.
Your mama ain't going to let you go. And we used to talk about each other like that.
Yeah.
And your mama ain't going to let you go.
Putting each other in the dustbin.
Yeah. So he said, man, we both was Baptists, and both of our parents was church lovers, church goers. And he said, well, man, we might be able to make it if we play it right.
Strategy.
Right, at 13.
At 13.
Yeah.
This is remarkable.
Exactly. So he said, you know, once the pastor get up and began preaching, we'll raise that finger. And you have to keep that finger
We all know
in
what
the
it
air
means, right?
until your mother acknowledge that finger. That means you can go on the outside. So I held my finger up. I'm waiting for my mother. She saw it, but she wanted to pretend like she didn't. But she finally acknowledged me. So my friend did the same thing. Our bicycle was already ready. And we was about 4 or 5 houses
This is organized.
from the church, right?
Yes.
So we ran
You had your
from the
getaway
church.
bike and everything.
Right, got on the bicycles and went to the Greyhound bus station.
My God.
We should have known, but our little brains wasn't built high enough for us to understand if there's no traffic, if there's no pedestrians, something is going on.
Something's wrong.
Because Lamar was a bit busy street during that time, but nothing was going on. So we looking through the plate glass and can't see anything, and we kept doing that. We would walk up to the end and look around, didn't see nobody. My friend opened the door without my knowledge and pushed me in. The first thing I saw was a sign that read, "Whites only," up top. I looked at the sign, I said, But now I want to check out the waiting area to see what's so different in the white only waiting area that's different in the colored,
Right.
we will therefore refer to as colored area. So I didn't see anything different other than space.
Yeah, just separation.
Yeah, just the separation. And the white had a larger space. So I'm looking, I had plenty of time to go back out because the sidewalk was like here and I'm here. So I didn't go mingling around.
You just surveyed
Yeah, right.
from where you were.
So the next thing I knew, this officer came up behind me and hit me on my shoulder and asked, "Why are you in here, boy?" And I was polite and truthful. I said, "Officer, my friend out there pushed me in here." He said, "What friend?" "He's out there, officer." So he caught me by my wrist, led me on out. I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and I looked straight ahead. I could see the bicycle that we had put behind Central High School by the cafeteria. We wanted to make sure we could get a good getaway. Those bicycles were still there, but my
But your friend was gone.
wasn't. So he took me back inside around the corner and called for a transport vehicle. The transport vehicle came to the front of the bus station and they put me in. And we rode and rode and rode and rode and we rode some more. And we finally made it to Parchman Prison. Now, I didn't know where we were. I had never been to Parchman Prison before. And they told me to grab a mattress. I did. And I put the mattress down. And the next morning, I'm still asleep and other inmates stay up and talking. First thing they wanted to know, "What you do, young blood?" I said, "I didn't do anything." They laughed, you know. "We have a comedian in here." I said, "No, man, I didn't do nothing. I just was at the Greyhound bus station." You wouldn't be on death row just for being at the bus station. So I asked one of the inmates, "Man, what is death row?" So here we go again with another comedian. I said, "Seriously, I don't know anything about death row. What is death row?" He said, "When they hook those devices up to you and your eyes just pop out, and once your eyes pop out, you'll start shaking and you'll foam at the mouth, then you'll just die." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, that's what's gonna happen to you." I mean, they wasn't as nice in talking to me as I am to you.
As you're relaying right now, right?
Yes, and I was just sick. I began to regurgitate. I began to wet on myself. A lot of things happened during that time. But we had a president named John F. Kennedy. Supposedly, he had some aides here in Jackson. that was just looking over the arrest of the Freedom Riders. And supposedly he was, one of them called him. I'm saying supposedly because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But the call went to the governor from the president. His name was Ross Burnett. And asked the governor, do you have minors in your prison? Supposedly he said no. But the next day, the governor called Parchman and told them to bring me back to Jackson. After coming back to Jackson, they called my mother, told my mother, you better get to the police department right away.
And she had no idea where you were.
No idea,
So that,
because
that
she,
whole 24 or however many hours it had been.
It was a bunch of hours.
Bunch of hours. We can't quantify it. Right.
So my mom thought they was asking her to come to the police department to identify my remains.
My God.
So when she walked in this room, she opened the door and she spotted me. And my mom was real religious. She's gone on now. But she just yelled out, ooh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. That's my baby. Ooh, Jesus. And she began running. And I'm saying to myself, if she doesn't stop, she's gonna run over me. And she did just that. She ran, just flattened me right there on the floor and was just hugging, squeezing, feeling, wanted to know about the knots that was on my head. And I had a little blood coming down. She wanted to know about that. And oh, she's crying. She, excuse me. She's doing everything. Tears falling in my mouth, snot falling in my mouth. I mean, it was a day. There was several days that was with me that I will never forget, and that's one of those days to see my mother. But she take me home, and she was very nice to me. Still rubbing my head, had me sitting up under her like I was her boyfriend. And she's driving with, she's driving with the left hand and the right one is just rubbing me, just, baby, you okay, you gonna be this and that. So we get home. And my mom changed when we got home. Yeah. She said, I don't know why you won't be like your other brothers. Not in this tone. Her tone had elevated somewhat. She started telling me things that you smelling yourself.
Now you got to explain to the viewers now. We know what that means.
Well, I
What does
know.
you're smelling yourself
But I
mean?
thought when she said you smelling yourself, I've been gone for 7, 11, 12 days. I've been away. So I'm saying,
you took it literally.
yeah.
But she meant it figuratively.
Yeah. So I said, so do. You've been gone that long. You can't.
Right, absolutely, Mama.
Yeah. So I said, well, I'll take a shower. She said, boy, I'm not talking about that. You done got so you don't want to mind me. You too grown. She said, I got something for you. She said, get in that house. And once you get in that house, drop them. I'm saying to myself, this woman don't know what I've been through. She won't let me tell her, but she said, drop them. And I was somewhat of a obedient child.
Somewhere.
And I went in and I dropped them.
Yeah.
And my mother came in the house with 3 switches. And she took those 3 switches and she began to braid those switches. Yes, like your hair is.
Yes.
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 And she braided it until it became one. And she took that one switch and she beat the she beat the stuffing out of me. And that was it. That happened in July, and I didn't leave the house until September because school
had to start.
Yes, and I had to go. And I met a man named James Bevel. Mr. Bevel was an activist here in Jackson. I would say, is my opinion, one of the best I ever met. And he wanted me to join forces with him.
Now wait, your mother's reaction and her response, and as a mother, I can't imagine what my emotions would have been seeing my child in the state that you were in, not knowing where my child was for however many hours and days. I don't know what my reaction would have been, but I'm gleaning from her response that she did not necessarily take too kindly to you doing any other movement work. Is that accurate?
That's true. That's true. Not only movement work, housework either. I was able to just sit around the house all day and try and heal because my chest, my stomach area was just messed. It was just raw.
Okay.
And the side of my side was just raw. So, I didn't feel comfortable being on the outside with the other kids. But when September came, I knew I had to go to school.
Sure.
And that first day school was out, I met James Bevel, and I told him, I don't want no parts of this. And he said, well, man, you would be ideal. You've been the parchment. You could help me recruit other young kids. You could do fundraisers for us. You could do all of these things. And I had to just curse him out. Literally curse him out for him to leave me alone. Because I'm thinking about that beat down.
Right. From mama.
Yes. That I had gotten. And I'm thinking about Parchment Prison.
Yeah. Defense mechanisms just start to come into play.
That made you say you don't want no parts of it.
I can't do that again.
Can't do it. So James left me and came back maybe a week later, and I still had not healed. And I began to unbutton my shirt enough where I could pull my shirt open for him to see.
Sure.
Yes. And I turned for him to see my side. He said, man, that happened to you in Parchment? I said, no. This is what my mother did. And he was shocked. Man, your mother beat you like that? I got defensive. I said, yeah, so what? What you want to do about it? That's me.
Still at 13, it seems like you had this sophisticated way of processing what your mother seemed to be projecting as her fear, and perhaps not having the tools to know, how do I protect my child from this? So she resorted to that, and some way in your 13-year-old wisdom, you seem to understand that there was affection bound up in that.
Understood it well, but I still wanted to do something other than what I was doing.
Sure.
And that was to become a freedom rider. I wanted to just be a helper in some kind of way. I began to think about kids that I didn't have. I'm only 13.
Yeah.
Wondering whether or not my kids would be treated the same way that I'm being treated.
Forced you to mature rapidly.
Rapidly,
That
yes, ma'am. I think going to Parchment Prison made a man out of me. And it made me think, and it made me realize that something must be done. And I kind of put it on I put it on me that I got to do what I got to do.
I think that's remarkable. I think it's remarkable because as you shared your story, which first of all, thank you for going through that again for us so that we understand your experience. What's remarkable is kind of how you started out with this curiosity. Just watching cartoons, which helps to situate us that you were a child. But then you were curious about what was happening to other people. And that spark, right, gets us through all of 100 arrests later, working at the Civil Rights Museum now, gets us through all of this history that you have with sacrificing your comfort for the benefit of others, your children and other people's children, me and my children. And so I want to shift a little bit because what you shared, I think, points brilliantly to what we saw happening 60 years ago. All of these young people who could have made different decisions, but made a decision to become involved in something that was bigger than them, something that really forced them to mature rapidly. Nsombi, when you think about some of the current work that you all are doing at One Voice, do you see echoes or any sort of mimicking of the type of energy and motivation that Mr. Watkins is talking about having as a young person?
Oh, absolutely. We can't help but to learn from and honor what people like Mr. Watkins brought to the movement. You know, we live in it and stand in it every day. And I've heard Mr. Watkins tell his story several times, and every time I hear him tell it, I learn something new. But listening to him tell it this time, when he talked about Governor Ross Barnett, you know, it made me think about these images and these things that we still have named after these people that cause so much harm in our state. Because here in Mississippi, we still have the Ross Barnett Reservoir.
We do.
We had the Eastland Courthouse, Eastland, another segregationist, and we still have all of these images of segregationists in Confederacy, images of the Confederacy that still exist here.
That's right.
You know,
We just replaced the flag.
We just replaced the state flag,
Yeah, 3 years
symbol
ago.
of the Confederacy. So it made me think about that. But, you know, so it just made me think about that. But those lessons from the Civil Rights Movement, we use those in our organizing work. Number one, because they work. They're just
something
good
went
lessons,
right. Something went right.
Exactly. They're tried and true, and they work. And the reason why they work is because they put community first. The reason why the Civil Rights Movement was so successful here in Mississippi is because the community people like Mr. Watkins and Ms. Hamer and other folks, they were in charge.
That's right. That's right.
And they were based here in Mississippi and they ran things. So no matter who you had coming in from other states and other places, they were in control.
Yeah.
They had their disagreements.
Of course.
And their fights over strategy and what, you
They
know.
were human.
Okay, as we always do.
Yeah.
But they were in control, and they looked out for each other. They had their safety mechanisms. They didn't have cell phones back then. Okay.
What was that like?
Right. But and so they had to rely on other mechanisms to let each other know, hey, you know, we're traveling from Jackson to Winona, or Jackson to Greenwood, or Jackson to Greenville today. How am I going to let you know that I've made it safely and that I'm not dead?
Yeah. My gosh.
And so all of those lessons,
Those tactics.
and strategies, we as young organizers studying under this Mr. Watkins and our other Mr. Watkins, Hollis Watkins, we had to read and study those. And amazingly, 30, 40 years later, still relevant.
Of course.
Still relevant.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
It's amazing, right? We heard him talk about the strategy of 13-year-old boys, right? to figure out how they were going to get to the bus station when we get there, what we're going to do, and all
Who was going to look out?
Yeah, we got to look out. Let's park our bikes here. I think that's remarkable. Allytra, I want to kind of build upon that, because these strategies that Nsombi is pointing to, that Mr. Watkins and so many other of our leaders across this movement took up, that kept the movement alive, so much so that we can talk about it right now. That I've heard the story before and I learned something new today, and I'm grateful because now we have this sort of history to share with the future. But I want to think about the ways that Mississippi has kind of built a model for movement work, because a lot of the things Nsombi is describing were really honed right here, not only in Jackson, but across the state. These strategies and these mechanisms that, even though we have this modern technology, we've had to revert to some of the strategies that were used when Mr. Watkins was 13.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And Medgar Evers was living in this house.
Yes.
We've gone back to those security measures. We've gone back to those messaging efforts. So can you maybe talk about some of the ways that we maybe overlook now, but we see Mississippi leading in this political landscape in terms of access and equity and justice?
So thank you, Mr. Watkins, for your story and the courage to tell that story. But Mississippi is where we are now because of courageous people like Mr. Watkins and Medgar Evers. Courage in a time where it was very dangerous to be courageous. So the core of that has led us 60 years later to where we are now. And now we call it relational organizing, but it's
We gave it a fancy name.
fancy name, but it's the same thing
Yeah.
as going to get your neighbor,
Yes.
talking to your friend,
Checking in.
and making sure that we are united and coordinated on our efforts for freedom. And the fight for freedom has not stopped. It's become a little more sophisticated, and we have made great strides. So Mississippi does have more black elected officials than any other state in the United States. It may not feel that way.
That's staggering.
Yes.
I think we just need a moment there and for you to repeat that statistic.
So Mississippi has more black elected officials than any other state in the United States. It may not feel that way because where we have black leadership, most times those are under-resourced areas.
That's right.
So they appear almost invisible to us. But they are black cities all across Mississippi. And then there is a fight, a very sneaky type of fight to take black leadership over in Mississippi.
To discredit it.
Yes, and I'm going to leave that right there.
Yeah.
So, because that is something. But out of Mississippi's 3 million voters, 2.2 million of those voters are black. So we have power in Mississippi to make more change. And that's where the opposition comes in. But we are making strides. In 2019, our gubernatorial race, our progressive candidate lost by 45,000 votes. Come back 2023, the progressive candidate lost by 26,000 votes.
So you see the chipping away.
45, 26,
Yeah.
yes.
That's
So
significant.
it is. It's chipping away slowly. So as the NAACP, we have 62 branches in the 82 counties. So we touch just about every part of the state. And one of our primary goals is to increase the black voting population by 10% every election cycle. We have elections every year. So we are
So that's
strategic.
a harrowing feat.
Oh, yeah.
To say the least.
Strategic. We're working on it bit by bit, but we have not completely overcome yet, but we're working on it.
We have not completely overcome yet. I appreciate your reference to the song, because that's what comes to heart and mind for us when we hear that phrase. It's the title of this discussion: "We shall overcome," or "We have overcome." Right. I want to talk. You brought up Brother Hollis Watkins, and when I think of Brother Hollis, I think about the songs, the freedom songs. I think about the melody of the movement, and there may be a sentiment that's a throwaway element, that was the entertainment, or that was the sort of superfluous or frivolous aspect of this really harrowing work. But I would like each of you to talk about the art of the movement and approaching this movement work with those artistic elements, like the songs, like the chanting. Your friend, he got you to that bus station with that kind of spontaneous Freedom Rider chant. But talk about just what it means to the movement, and perhaps just personally what it means for you. When you mentioned Brother Hollis, I lit up and my heart smiled, because that music was necessary. So I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Watkins. What about the music?
Well, the music was necessary. We could be being beaten, and I recall a lot of those.
Yeah.
The harder you hit me, the louder I would sing. And then my person next to me would be just as loud as I. And it was just like a rotation until the police officers would say, if y'all just don't shut this up, I'm gonna do so and so. We would get louder. And that was the thing. Even in jail, the women would be on one floor and we on another floor, but we would some kind of way get together on the same song. And you talking about some voices.
Harmonies.
So one voice?
Yeah.
You talking about some voices?
Yeah, pun intended.
Yeah. And
That's beautiful.
It was just, and Brother Hollis.
Yeah.
If we was at a
Angelic.
meeting, we would always do a song before the meeting opened. And you didn't have to ask who's gonna do the song, because when
He
it
knew
got
his job.
time for the song, Hollis started it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a courageous person. Often individual would get us confused, like even now.
Watkins.
Yeah.
Y'all about the same height.
Everything, yeah. Do you know Hollis Watkins? I said, yeah. How well do you know him? And I said, well, he's not with us now. This was recently. Then I had to go into that. Yeah. But just to answer your question about songs, about singing, it was part of the Freedom Riders' duties to sing. And we would do some songs. We would make up songs. You would have a verse. You would have whatever you want to make up. But it always was in line with what we was doing. Yeah.
Nsombi.
Such music in all art forms, it's such a healing ministry.
Healing.
And we don't do enough of it. And there's been such an effort to get it back, but it's always been a part of our work. And I remember a while ago we had been talking to young people about hip hop and how in the 90s hip hop had started being that form of political music,
Sure did.
political movement music for young people. And then there was such an effort on behalf of the record labels to make it not political and to pay artists to not be political and to talk about other things.
Right.
And so you have some artists that are still doing that now, but it's not not going in the direction that it was going in then. but it's a ministry, and it's what we need, and it's a part of organizing work. It's not, like you said, it's not entertainment.
Yeah.
It's not something to put on a program.
Right.
It's a ministry, and it's a part of the work.
So this work is hard.
Yeah.
It takes your mind, body, and your soul, and the music feeds into your spirit. And if you really listen to the lyrics, all of the lyrics are feeding into the spirit. Fannie Lou Hamer used to sing this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Yeah.
It's a little light, but guess what? It's coming, it's shining,
Yeah.
and I'm determined. So the music is part of the movement, and you can't really have one without the other. And some of the new rap, like They Not Like Us, I love it. So I'm a 90s rap girl too.
Of course, we came up in hip hop.
Yes. So it's a part of feeding back into yourself,
Yeah.
because you have to give of yourself for this work, for the greater good. So it's a way to feed back into those participants.
I love that. I love that you describe it, Nsombi, as healing and ministry. Allytra, I love that you are kind of pointing us back to almost this ancestral inheritance that we got, Mr. Watkins, that it became integral, that it wasn't separate. You know, it was, and everybody knew their role and the role that Brother Hollis and others had as the voice. And I mean, the way that you describe, we're not even on the same level of these carceral facilities, but we can sing. We can sing. I once heard Nikki Giovanni say, you know, you can kill the body, but you can't kill a song. And so what it takes me to, I mean, I think we'd be remiss in not acknowledging that we're sitting in this living room, the Evers living room, and Myrlie Evers had her piano right in this room, and she was an accomplished pianist and vocalist. And so, you know, kind of what that says to me, what each of you have shared, is that there's more to gift to posterity and future generations than struggle. That we're also giving them these stories through the song. We're giving them this upliftment through the song. We're giving them this hope through the song, which I think is remarkable. There's so many things that we've inherited, right, from the folks that came before us, every one of us. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, right, the takeaway. Mr. Watkins, you walked us through what I think can only be described as one of the most traumatic experiences of your life. And now you have made a choice to spend every day in a museum that really calcifies that experience and demonstrates it for others, and you share with perfect strangers these very personal details about yourself. Is there an aspect of that work and making the decision to be in that space and do this thing that is healing for you? Is that a ministry for you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Okay. After being asked to work there at the two Mississippi museums, I wasn't sure because I had began to have problems sleeping. So this person and persons kept asking, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? The job is there. So I finally said yes. I went to work on a Tuesday, and at 9, I think by 9:30 I quit. I just couldn't take it. I saw my mugshot along with my friends' mugshots that was no longer with us. And I had began to reflect back on some of the things we used to do and how we would do those things. And I walked out the door and went home. And received a call that afternoon. I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. But by February, I was back down there. And I began having problems really sleeping, and I'm married. And this particular night, I woke up and I just began to just fight whoever was in front of me. It wasn't but in front of me, but my wife. And I thought I was dead. And I'm trying to fight these Klansmen
Wow.
off me.
This is triggered by starting to work at the museum.
Exactly.
Wow.
So I took off for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And went back and I worked in what we call we got two museums, the History Museum. That wasn't me.
That's
So
Not your history.
That's triggering.
Yeah, so I'll just go home. And I was told just work on this particular side over there where you don't have all of these pictures and things out there before you.
As if that history that is traumatic, is very real for you,
Oh, yes, ma'am.
doesn't also exist in the whole of Mississippi's history.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Watkins, so I've never heard you say this. I've never heard you tell this part, because
I've never heard that part either.
what it seems like is an acknowledgement that there is a version of what happened in Mississippi and across the South and across this country that is sanitized to the point that, well, that shouldn't give you the nightmares and the tremors and everything else that you were suffering, because we've intentionally left some truths out of it. That's startling to me.
Well, number one, the reason you all haven't heard this part, I'd never done in-depth, I never had, should I
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
an in-depth conversation about what happened later on in life.
That's right.
I mean, I've been through holy hell, if I may,
Yeah.
behind those 109 arrests, the beatings that I received, all of that began to resurface as we speak. Now, let me put a little humor in this, if I may. That the first time I saw a psychiatrist, told me that the beating that my mother put on me, that the criminalization that was there probably was beaten out of me at that particular time. Now, I've spoken to several other individuals, and they say it could be, but there's no scientific proof.
That you can beat an experience or a memory
Out
of a person.
That's what I'm told. That's what I'm told. But I can tell you this, when I went back to work at the museum, by not seeing those things that I saw the first time did help. And I was told if I would talk about the experience, it would help as well.
Okay.
And I never could talk about Parchment. I just talked about my being arrested, but I wouldn't talk about Parchment.
Yeah.
And one day a student asked, Mr. Watkins, did you ever go to Parchment? And I said, yes. Then they wanted to know about Parchment, and I couldn't get into it that particular day. But later on, a few weeks later, I was able to get into it. Gradually. And I mention it now on a daily basis. The more I talk about it, believe it or not, the better I feel.
Wow. So it's almost, exercising
Exactly.
that thing out. I want to, Nsombi and Allytra, I want to ask you all. We hear Mr. Watkins talking about kind of how you've been gradually motivated. And your movement work has evolved. So it's very, active in the trenches at a certain point. And at this point, we are benefiting from all of this narrative, right? Like, you're a griot for us, right? Like, and one of the things I think is so powerful about you being at that museum is that you are a constant reminder that we're not so far removed from the things that happened to you and the things that you and your peers and our elders fought through. For young people to come in that museum and see your mugshot and then talk to you.
Exactly.
I mean, it immediately shrinks that gap. So on a sort of personal motivation note, Allytra and Nsombi, would you mind sharing your motivations for the work that you do? Allytra said it's hard, and I felt that. I felt that.
So I grew up in Biloxi in a house with grandparents. And Dr. Gilbert R. Mason, who led the fight to integrate the Gulf Coast beaches, was our doctor.
Wow. Wow.
So the story of integrating the beaches was a story I heard all the time, but never as a child really understood the depth of the story. As I became a young adult, then it started to hit. Well, Dr. Mason, my grandfather was one of his security guys. He was one of the madmen. And they would sit on the roof of his house to protect his house at night.
Yeah.
His car was overturned on the beach, and my grandfather went and bailed everyone out. He had a federal job on Keesler Air Force Base, so he could put his name on lawsuits and not worry about losing his job. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I really understood what type of sacrifice it took in that time and what they were doing and how heavy it is. And it's not that long ago. So, I have children, I have a grandbaby. I don't want them to experience that.
Yes.
So this hard work is worth it for them.
Yeah.
First, I just have to go back to the museum thing.
Go back, yeah.
And I just have to say something about the hypocrisy of Mississippi and the fact that I have to watch my language, but it just brings the anger back that we have the two museums in the first place, because we were never supposed to have two museums. And so when you said that, that triggered me again, because we were only supposed to have one museum. And to make the white people happy, we had to have two museums. One is supposed to be the history museum, that's supposed to be the safe one, with the Elvis stuff and all that, and then the Civil Rights Museum. And so, I'm sick of the silliness that goes on in Mississippi. It's just like, in order to get Martin Luther King Day, we had to get Robert E. Lee Day.
History Day or something.
I'm sick of the games in Mississippi. We never really deal with the trauma of slavery, civil rights movement, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, none of that. But you're just supposed to go in there, just come on in here and tell your story over and over again. You'll get over it. We'll be all right. No, we're not all right. We're not all right. We're not okay as a people. We have never healed from everything that has been done to us in this country. And I'm sick of people just thinking we're just supposed to get over it. But I just keep, doing this because, I stand on the shoulders of folks like Mr. Watkins, who has sacrificed so much and keeps on going and is able to tell his story to elementary school kids every day. I do this every day for my grandmother, who didn't get beyond a 6th grade education and wash clothes for folks to put my mom and aunt through Tougaloo as, you know, first generation graduates. And a grandfather who, you know, went through World War II but didn't get the benefits of GI Bill because he was black going through the war. So that's what motivates me.
I love that you went in both directions, Nsombi, right? We're talking about progress and the path forward. So obviously we don't want these young people, our children, grandchildren, to have the same experiences that we have suffered through, that our elders have suffered through. We want a different world for them. But Nsombi, you said something that I often think about, right? Like having a great grandmother who was never able to cast a vote in the state of Mississippi and still made her children go march when MLK came to town, and still fed freedom movement workers and housed them in their living room on the couch and cooked food for them because they couldn't safely stay at any establishment. So I think as we round out our conversation, we're saying we have overcome, and I think we need to play around with the verb tense there. We are overcoming. Yes. I mean, it's a constant progress. I want to think about what's next. Like, what is the charge for who comes next? Who's got next? What do we tell them? What's at stake? And what has been sacrificed so that they are in the position to take up the charge? I'm gonna start with you, Allytra. This way.
What is at stake? Stakes haven't changed in 60 years, unfortunately. Okay. So Mississippi, you have the right to vote, but we have the most restrictive voting laws. You have to register to vote at least 30 days in advance. We don't have early voting, so we have 12 hours to cast every vote. You can vote absentee, but you have to meet these certain requirements. Oh, and you have to come to the circuit clerk's office, or you have to go through this ridiculously complicated process to get the ballot mailed to you and mailed back. So these are all unnecessary challenges to even accessing the ballot box. We have to keep telling our stories to the younger generations so that they can understand what is at stake. It's wonderful that we have access to so much with the internet, with social media, but we have to use it carefully and understand that everything you see on TikTok is not vetted. It's not necessarily the truth. So to understand our history, to know who we are and where we need to go, and to not take things for granted. We are far from overcome. We have a long road ahead of us. And there are times where we are hit with things that we have to work through, like we have to expand Medicaid in Mississippi. We have people literally dying when they're having asthma attacks because they don't have access to an emergency room. There's no reason that should happen in 2024. We are in 2024. Why are people dying? So we have to push these issues forward so that people understand that this is not this is us. And we have to take care of us. This is us. Yes, this is not oh, that's them over there. Oh, no. That's all of us. So if I'm in an area that doesn't have an emergency room and I get sick, guess what? I die just like everybody else.
You dead.
I'm dead. So that's real. So we just have to keep expressing that to our younger generation, to not get comfortable. It's not all good.
It's not all good.
That's absolutely right. And when Allytra talked about that high number of black elected officials at the local level, We have to keep telling those elected officials, along with our community leaders, like our NAACP presidents, and I am a local NAACP president, that we have to make sure to support our local elected officials and make sure that they have the resources they need to create these thriving cities, because we know that there are concerted efforts to make sure that we starve these cities that are trying to do progressive things. So we have to make sure that we continue to push the message that if we want thriving cities, good health care, good education, high wages, that we have to continue to develop plans, stick together, and work hard.
Yeah. Mr. Watkins, you're going to get the last word.
Okay, great. I agree with both of these young ladies here. But I would just like to go just one step further. Is we must embrace our young folks more than what we are doing.
Okay.
We got to provide the leadership to those individuals, because I don't think they know which way they want to go.
And their power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we must do what we must do, and that's embrace them. Yes.
I think that's a perfect ending note. We must do what we must do and embrace our young people, because they might be 13 and decide to ride their bikes.
That's right.
Listen, thank you, each of you. I could talk to you for hours, and I'm shocked that I was able to hold it together, because I was moved to the point of physical emotion here. I just want to thank you all for being truthful and for being who you are in the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lumumba.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you felt that you were a part of this conversation, and there are more conversations to be had. So take something that you heard or learned here into your own living room. And as you're doing that, make sure you ask everyone you're talking to if they are eligible, if they are registered to vote. October 7th is the last day to register to vote in this national election, but you've got municipal elections and midterm elections coming up soon. So please register to vote, make your voices heard, be a part of the path forward. Thank you.
Executive producers, No Tears Project, Oxford American, National Park Service, and Medgar and Myrlie Evers Home National Monument, in partnership with One Voice and NAACP Mississippi State Conference. Made possible by National Park Foundation, Jazz Road, and South Arts, along with supporting partner Visit Jackson. Additional partners include Shady Grove Missionary Baptist Church and Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site.